Hey everybody, welcome to the Patty G Show. I am your host, Patty G. Great episode up ahead, but before we get to that, we are brought to you by some phenomenal companies, some phenomenal organizations and partners in the community, and those are Falaya Real Estate, Lake Men's Health Center, Horizon Financial Group, and Gage. Without them, we couldn't do the show. We are more than appreciative of everything that they do for us each and every time you see us. We are brought to you by those wonderful companies. Y'all, enjoy the show.
We have a class tomorrow. Yes, an early one, though, so that's okay.
Oh, perfect.
I love early classes.
Do they just come off of work, I guess, early?
Sometimes corporate events, yes. But an early class means I get to go home at a reasonable time, so that's never a bad thing.
So what time is a normal class?
Classes typically start in the evenings, anywhere from 5 to 7 p.m. During the week, I would say 7 p.m. just because people are getting off work and they want to give enough time for their guests to be able to get there on time. So, it's starting at 7. They'll finish between 9:30 and 10. Sometimes they'll linger a little bit, and then, we clean up and hit the road. Usually, we hope, between 11 and 12.
So you're like operating like a real bar then.
Yes, bar hours. Yes, like early bird art bar hours. That's what I operate. Yes, but yeah. So it just it's a long day, 10 a.m. till.
Wait, so you get there at 10 to start prepping?
No, so during the day I have a store, so that's what's different about my space.
Okay.
During the day I sell bitters, equipment, garnishes, syrups, glassware. Those types of things, all the things we use in classes, minus the alcohol. I don't sell bottles of alcohol, but I sell those during the day. So if you were to think of a model or an example, think Red Stick Spice.
Okay.
She doesn't sell groceries, but she sells spices and all the other
Cooking
teas.
accoutrements.
Correct. And then you can take classes there to learn.
So it's the Red Stick Spice of the alcohol world.
It is. That is exactly what it is. She really was my inspiration for my business model. She really was.
So have you met Ann?
Mm-hmm. She's amazing.
I love Ann. She's phenomenal.
She is. And Baton Rouge is so much better for having her and her business as a part of it, because the flavors that she has made immediately accessible to us. I'm so grateful for that. And, a lot of places don't have that type of resource. And like I said, she's so knowledgeable on top of it all, and just a really, really nice person too.
Yes.
But that was my mindset, was, to create a space where bring in those types of things that if you're serious about making cocktails, you would want to have those. But a lot of times we don't have the vocabulary or the familiarity to know what those things are. They're intimidating. And so you either buy it and it sits on a shelf, or you don't buy it. But once you learn, you just get the opportunity to create and explore so many new flavors. And I don't know, that's how a cocktail should be too. Yeah.
So backing up a little bit with the Tipsy Librarian as the brand, how did you come up with that? What were you doing before Tipsy Librarian?
I was a librarian. Yeah, so I always say it's a shtick, but it's an authentic shtick. So but I was the librarian for a long time at Catholic High School. So I was there for 13 years and at a different school previously prior to that. But I was a librarian, got my master's in library science a long time ago, and but realized I wasn't completely ready to abandon that part of my identity, and I realized that might seem a little strange. I know my students were always perplexed at the thought that someone would actually go get a degree to become a librarian.
I didn't know there was such a thing.
There is. There really is. There's a master's in library science, but I that was an important part of who I was, and I tried to figure out a way that could work in this new enterprise. And the funny thing is, I was afraid it would sound cutesy or kitschy, and I don't consider myself either of those things. But it seems to have stuck. And even though on the surface it seems like such a departure, it really isn't. At the end of the day, I see myself as a resource for people, connecting them to the experience that they're looking for, what it is that they're wanting to learn, and just providing that for them. It's all service industry at the end of the day. Very, very customer focused is still, how it's driven.
So what made you want to switch, I guess, from being the librarian at Catholic High to doing this whole new endeavor? I mean, what was the moment where you were like, I'm done with traditional librarianness. I'm going to convert to something totally different, not done in Baton Rouge
or a lot of other
or
places.
Anywhere.
Yes.
Like I don't know of any. I'm sure there are somewhere in some other states, but as far as Louisiana goes, you got to be the first one.
I am, and it really just stemmed from. I actually had the idea while I was still a librarian, and I tell people that I often, it's something that I thought about. I think even a couple of years before I left Catholic, but it was one of those ideas that exist only in your mind, kind of like I also say, like, well, one day I'm going to move down to the Caribbean. That's also another thing that I don't know that I really expect to happen, but just a thing that I say, like, oh, that would be a nice thing to do. But it really just came from an idea of wanting a space to exist, that something I always wanted for myself, the type of space, but never did exist, and something that I thought I could do. I didn't always love cocktails. In fact, I'm fairly new to the cocktail world. I was talking to Alan Walter over at the Breaks Bar, and Alan is
he's a wealth of knowledge.
He's an OG. I mean, he really is, and just, extraordinarily gifted at what he does. And as a matter of fact, when I told him how long my journey, and he's like, oh, you're a baby, huh? Not because of my age either, but just because of, this new foray. But it really just stemmed from the fact that it was several years back when I had one of the best cocktails I'd ever had in my life. And prior to that, I certainly, I didn't have the vocabulary to be able to articulate what I wanted. I knew I liked a French 75, but even when I would order those, they were oftentimes just okay. They were meh, they were fine. But I had this extraordinary sparkling cocktail because I recognized on the menu. And I always say, obviously I was an optimist, because even though I tended to think most cocktails weren't great, I guess I was, like I said, optimistic. And it was so beautiful and balanced and interesting. And I fell in love. But the logical side of me knew that it just couldn't be random. I mean, why is it that so many are terrible, but every now and then you get something that's amazing? And I really wanted to learn what this person who made that for me, I wanted him to teach me. He was actually a master mixologist, and it took almost 2 years, I think, when I was it was out of state, and so coordinating, trying to get something that would work, but he did, and that just ignited a passion in me, and it wasn't horribly long after that COVID happened, where I think a lot of us had time to dig in, make a lot of cocktails. We had a lot of
virtual happy hours.
Yes. Thankfully, the liquor stores were not closed during that time. They would deliver to your house. But anyway, so I remember taking the Apple Master Class series. They had this mixology one. So I took that one too, and just started ordering books and reading, and I joke, making an unhealthy number of cocktails through the years. And I've since then had a couple of other people who've shared some of their expertise with me. This past summer, I took the class with Toby Maloney while he was in New Orleans, and he had the Violet Hour and Milk and Honey, I think in New York, the Violet Violet Hour in Chicago, but he won last year's James Beard Award for his Bartender's Manifesto. I teach a number of his cocktails, and I love the way that his book is organized. And so I devoured it. Like I said, I teach his cocktails. So when I saw he was going to be teaching in New Orleans, and I saw that it was primarily geared for industry professionals, I wasn't sure how I fit in with that, but I was very excited nonetheless. And nonetheless, like I said, and I'll be honest, I was nervous when I took the class because it was about 8 months into my mobile business, and I was nervous that I was going to learn that all the things I'd been teaching people were wrong. It was not. It was so on point, and I was so grateful for that. And but all that is to say that it just fed into a passion, and my whole goal was to make something that seemed elusive accessible to the average person at home. We make amazing meals here in our homes. We have company over. Food is such a part of our culture here. And I just didn't understand why cocktails had to be so elusive, because you can follow a recipe and end up with something completely terrible.
That's a fact. Mm-hmm. Been there and done that.
Mm-hmm. We talk about why that happens in my classes. But so I wanted to know more. Like, I wanted to make more sense of it. And that was when I thought maybe there are other people who would want to learn what I've learned, and so that they can, in their home, recreate beautiful cocktails for themselves and their guests whenever they want. And, and still go somewhere and have an amazing cocktail, still appreciate that, but that you can make something fantastic for yourself and your guest. I say in my class, this all stems from the idea that a cocktail is meant to be a vacation in a glass. It should be a momentary respite from the mundane of everyday life. And it's often the experience that we have when we're on vacation, right? And maybe it's because we're relaxed, we're away from the usual demands of our lives, we're with people that we enjoy, but we just tend to be physically present wherever we are when we're on vacation. And I find a cocktail invites that in the same way, right? Because, one of the things I've realized over the last few months, a cocktail is different from wine or beer. So wine, you usually need food or something to bring out all the amazing flavors of it. But there are also things that beer and wine that you can enjoy while you're busy doing other things. They taste great, but you can sort of sip it mindlessly while you're cooking, prepping, dinner or whatever. But a cocktail is different because, first of all, it doesn't need, if it's done correctly. Let me preface all that by saying, if it's done correctly. Everything you're building in that shaker or that mixing glass is meant to highlight what's best about that spirit or those ingredients. And so it doesn't need anything else. But if it's done correctly, you can't enjoy it. You won't enjoy it the same way if you're busy doing something else. Even if you're just sitting, scrolling through your phone, a cocktail's not as good. A cocktail is best enjoyed, I always say the only thing that can make a great cocktail better is enjoying it in the company of someone else you enjoy. But it invites you to just be present, to sip and savor those flavors in that glass and just kind of be. And whether it's, 10 minutes that it takes to drink it, you make it look beautiful, you bring it to your nose, it stimulates, your olfactory, which of course affects your taste. And it's just a lovely moment. I always say put on a great playlist and have that vacation in a glass and just relax and be there.
Welcome to the brand new Falaya mobile app. We took all the same tech that's helped hundreds of people sell their homes themselves and packed it into an easy-to-use app for your phone. When you download the Falaya mobile app on either the Apple or Android App Store, you'll immediately be able to see the power of this game-changing tool. From the seller's dashboard, you can navigate to all the information that you need. We intentionally separated everything into key groups, such as tasks to be completed, buyer leads for your listing, and contact information for everyone involved through closing. When you get an offer on your property, you can simply review and respond all within the app. No matter where you are in the world, you'll be able to monitor everything that's going on with your property from listed to sold. It's truly the power of Falaya in the palm of your hand. Download the app and see for yourself. Falaya, it's real estate reimagined.
Yeah, that is. I'm just like, man, I'm taken back now. I just need a cocktail in my hand.
That's right. We just need cocktails right now.
So you started a mobile business.
Mm-hmm.
What led into that? I mean, that takes a lot of planning and a lot. I mean, you definitely sound like you're a planner to begin with, and it sounds like you thought this thing all the way through even before you poured your first cocktail for a class. So walk us through kind of what went into getting that mobile business off the ground.
Well, so here's the funny thing. I didn't want to be mobile, but my husband, who owns his own business, informed me that I had to be mobile because I didn't even know if anyone would be interested in supporting this business. You know, he's like, you don't just open a brick and mortar. That is a very good way to be out of business and broke within a year. And so I had to really think about what do you need, first of all, when you're creating a cocktail? It turns out a lot of stuff. I know we would come in with crates and crates and crates, and people were always taken aback. I'm like, I'm here to make cocktail making accessible. And
you got a truck in the
Yes.
driveway with all your supplies.
Exactly. Completely accessible. But so that was the mindset. What would people need? And so then I set up, I made sure I had to get all the things right. I had to initially go ahead and get my resale certificate to do that, because what was important to me was that whenever someone leaves my class, they not only get the recipe, they know all the brands. I tell them everywhere they can locate the ingredients in town. I didn't want people driving all over. I didn't want you to have to special order anything online. There were some ingredients, bitters and other things that I used that weren't locally available. So I made the decision that if it were an ingredient that if it weren't available locally, I would carry that. Otherwise, I was very glad to send people to wherever to support that local business, right? But if this particular brand of bitters was something that I used in a lot of my recipes and no one else in town had it, I was going to carry it because I want you to be able to get it. If you want to recreate this, you can order it from me or purchase it from me.
Right.
So I had to get that. So then my next step was to call the ATC and say, hey, I don't know if you have probably not ever looked at the ATC's website applying for a permit.
I have not.
Wow.
I imagine it's pretty in-depth, though.
There are lots of options to choose from. And so I called them up and I said, hey, I'm trying to figure out what type of permit, license I need to apply for. And none of these seem to fit what it is that I want to do. And so, I explained to them what it is that I was wanting to do. And so they said, okay, well, we've never heard of that. So we're going to have to talk to our attorneys and get back with you.
No way.
Yes. And they did. I remember being so impressed by that. I'd not, and this is, I suppose, unintentional shade, but you always hear terrible things about dealing with, government, just that. Anyway, but they did. They called me back and they said, okay, so turns out there's nothing from us that you need. And I said, no. I think you must have misunderstood. This is what I'm looking to do. So I just need whatever license mobile bars have. And they said, no mobile bar has a liquor license. I was like, no, I'm sure they do. I won't tell you how many times they had to repeat, there are no mobile bars with liquor license before anyway.
So Educate me now,
Okay.
because now I'm intrigued.
Now you're like, okay, what is going on?
It was like, how does a mobile bar sell alcohol?
You can't. Well, I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone. So, but what you can do. Okay, so what you do is they said, so here's the bottom line. They said, there's nothing we're going to give you. As far as we're concerned, you're an educational consultant because you can't provide the alcohol and it's not on your property. So from our perspective, there's nothing from us that you need. You can't give it. You can't put it on your, like, there's nothing from us. So if you bring in someone like me, a mobile or even a mobile bartender,
educational consultant,
an educational consultant, exactly. So I don't actually, and that's what they said. They said, you're not making anybody's drinks. That's the other part. I don't make anyone's drinks. They make their own drinks. So
I never put that together. That a bartender makes the drinks and then serves it to people. You are educationally consulting people their way into make. Okay, all right, I'm tracking. This is great.
Yes, so that's what they said, and you don't make anyone's drink. So I didn't even technically need a responsible server's license permit, but I did get one.
Yeah, you didn't need not a liquor license. You didn't need an individual bartender license.
I didn't, but I did get one. I did because
just out of abundance of precaution.
Yes.
So you sat through the ATC exam to get. Oh,
I did.
All right. Bless your soul.
It's so not fun.
Bless your soul.
And I was so disappointed. There are no questions on there about making drinks. People think like when you have a bar. No, it has nothing to do with that. It is everything to do with how to identify a fake ID, how the body processes alcohol. And I'm not saying that those aren't important things, but frankly, we might be better served if it included how to actually make a decent drink. Anyway,
that's what you're here for.
That's right. That's right.
You're the educational consultant for the ATC.
Correct. Sure. Yes. So once I realized that, again, I was really frustrated because I realized that was an extra burden for the person who's bringing me in. Oh, hey, here you go. By the way, you need to go buy these brands of alcohol and I teach why in my class. I don't ever just say, oh, get a bottle of a Blanco tequila. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things I teach in my class is all spirits are distilled differently. They have different proofings, like I said, just different methods of distillation that produce very different flavors. And they don't always mix together with other ingredients equally. And anyone who's ever made an old fashioned with just any whiskey will quickly attest to that. So, and we cover, like I said, we talk about all those things in depth. So I'm very specific and, okay, this is what you want to learn to make. These are the brands you have to buy based on the size of your group. This is how many bottles of a thing you would need. Martin's was wonderful in working with me and providing just basically a concierge service where I would send them the list. Let me backtrack. When people would, want to bring in the Tipsy Librarian for their group, I would have a question set for them because, of course, I do. If I can recommend books, I've got to be able to recommend cocktails, right? People don't know what they want to make. Their vocabulary and idea of what's out there, they don't have as an extensive vocabulary as what I would be able to provide. So I have a question set that gets to the heart of what is it that they're looking for. Then based off the information they give me, I send them probably on average about 10 different suggestions that are extraordinarily descriptive, that include all the ingredients, including the specific brands of spirits that are used, the method, the technique for making it, the type of glassware, the type of ice it is served over, and then a couple of sentences describing that cocktail, right? Because they don't know. I mean, they could read this list of descriptions. They have no idea what this is, at the end of the day. Is this bright and refreshing or is this spirit forward? And so once they go through that list, they'll then choose 3, right? And I then would send them, I would go on Martin's website, look up okay, make sure that they had what I needed them to have, pull up the pricing, say, okay, forward that information to that person once they approved it. I would then, forward it, CC, to Martin's. And then Martin's and that customer dealt with that. After that, I was done with that transaction. I didn't get anything from Martin's. A lot of times people thought I was getting a kickback. No, nothing.
They were just willing to work with you and make the process easy.
Absolutely. Yeah. They were amazing. Their customer service is phenomenal. And I think that surprises people that when there is that sort of relationship and there's not like some sort of kickback one way or the other. But no, it was just, I knew they would do a great job of taking care of my customers. And that's what mattered to me.
Yeah.
So that was that process that, I've done more math now since I've opened this business than I've ever done in my life. I can tell you exactly how many servings of a cocktail you can get out of a bottle, and including a tenth of an ounce to taste, yeah, it's very precise. Smokes. Well, you always have to make sure you have exactly enough, of everything. But again, we would start that process. I have checklists. I'm sure you can imagine. Pack all that up. It would take a day or two of packing, load it up, bring it to that place. Sometimes we would show up with 90 pounds of ice. And
why so much ice?
I'm very particular. Ice matters. If you're going to do it, the details
I guess you're right. It's the details.
It's the details. Your drink will never taste better than the amount of attention to detail the person making it puts into it. And so I tell everyone that. And I'm like, so that means tonight, if your drink isn't very good, they just have to blame the bartender.
Yeah, the bartender was rushed, was just throwing it together as quickly as they could.
That's right. If they make their own drink and it didn't turn out right, they can only blame themselves. But we take time in my class. We do all the things. But yes, so when I set that up, like I said, I got all of those things, set up that relationship with Martin's, and the rest was sort of history. And it was purely word of mouth. I advertised through the Scout Guide, but that was really the only, consistent advertising that I did, but it was almost purely word of mouth.
This episode is proudly presented by Gage. Gage is a local company here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. For over 40 years, Gage has provided businesses with the very best telecommunications, IT, and standby power services available. Gage has a variety of services, including Gage Cloud Voice. It is the last phone system your business will ever need. You need to give your business the ability to be accessible anytime, anywhere, and with Gage's cloud-based phone system, you'll be able to accomplish just that. Not only do they have Gage Cloud Voice, they have fully managed IT services that are proactive network monitoring, 24/7, 365, help desk, business continuity. They are there for you. What you're also going to need is some cybersecurity. Gage is there to safeguard your business from potential cyber threats, even when you aren't aware they exist. Gage also is power and leaders in standby generators. They are the #1 Cummins dealer on the Gulf Coast and provide generators to homes and businesses of any size so you can keep life going. Gage, better connected, a proud sponsor of the Patty G Show.
And I started the process in April of last year, trying to open a brick and mortar. Actually, it was probably mid-March, but it took a minute. We'll just say, and I always say, I invented a wheel. Government doesn't like wheels. It likes nice, neat boxes that it can check and fit you neatly into. And when you don't, it just creates a lot more.
It's headache.
Yes.
It's headache. Mm-hmm. And not because they're trying to prevent or do anything. It's just they have to figure out how to recreate the wheel as well.
Right.
What are the new guidelines? What are the new regulations? They've got to figure out to put into place to make sure they've got everything covered and not just say, oh, yeah, Miranda, you've got a great business idea. Roll with it. We're going to put you into this box we think you best fit in.
Right. And that was where my attorney had to champion. I would say I would have not been able to make it through this process without an attorney. That was recommended very early on by someone who has familiarity with the spirits industry. And I was naive, and I was like, "You think really? Do you think
Like, you think I need an attorney for this?
Right. Like, I was like, I mean, how hard could this be?" And he said, "Yes, you absolutely 100% do." And he was right. He was right. And so I have no doubt. What I learned through this is that being able to speak the language is important. I think especially in the spirits realm, food and beverage, and I get why. Even though I keep going back to vocabulary, I did not speak government's language at the time, right? So I'm grateful that I had someone who knew how to speak the language so it didn't create gridlock or frustration, because it would have come from me undoubtedly. I'll never forget, we sketched out our plan, and for my space, I had to make sure first that it was zoned for alcohol. You can't just anyway, and so, but I'll never forget, the person said to me, and he looked, my architect, and he looked and he said, "Why do you have this labeled as a kitchen? Are you preparing food?" I was like, "No, I'm not preparing food." And he said, "Well, why are you calling it a kitchen?" And I said, "Well, I mean, what else do you call the place that has a dishwasher and sinks?" And he said, "It's called a back of house." And he said, "A kitchen will raise so many red flags." And he said, "And you're not a kitchen. If you're not preparing food, that's not what you are. So why are you?" He said, "Just hire someone."
It's a sanitation station.
It is a back of house, and a back of house has different meaning than what a kitchen does. I did not know that. I do now. I know so much now. But it was a process, and even having someone who was knowledgeable of that language, it still took a while. It definitely still took a while, because, in government, their eyes, when I explained what I wanted to do, it was basically, okay, well, that's great. But to be able to provide liquor, you have to either be a bar or a restaurant. You're one of those two things. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, "But I'm not really a bar." And I'll never forget someone from the local, and she said, "I get it, but you're a bar, baby." She was like, "I get it, you're not a bar," but she's like, "But you're a bar, baby." I said, "All right, okay." Because if they've given you the license, because that's what they're able to, at this point, accommodate, right? Like, you have to fit in one of those two categories. And so if you fit in those categories, you have to then abide by all the rules, even if they seem sort of superfluous for what it is overkill for what you're trying to do. In their mind, we're giving you the license to be able to do this, and so we have to make sure that you meet all of our standards. So I get it, but it was a lot.
Yeah, you're not a bar.
I'm not a bar. Well, here's the funny thing. According to my license says that I'm a bar, but my lease prohibits me with Town Center from being a walk-in bar, meaning you can't just walk in off the street and order a drink.
Which you can't, because you got to have classes.
I have classes.
And even then, you can't order a drink.
Well, you could, yes. I mean, it's a private event. And so, like, when I have private events, you are welcome to. I mean, I do have, I can make drinks. I have the ability to be a private event space, in that I can provide the alcohol. I have the licensing to be able to do that. So.
But it's got to be under the nature of a private event.
Mm-hmm, correct.
Gotcha.
Like a reservation sort of event. Even though I refer to them as my public classes that people can sign up, no one just walks in off the street. And part of that is twofold, because, well, number one, the amount of planning that goes into it. Every person has their own station. I'm going to make sure that you have your own syrup, your own garnish, your own everything. I can't have people just walking in, and, I can't accommodate that properly.
Yeah.
But the other part of that is I have occupancy limitations because of, well, for for a variety of reasons, but I'll just say that I have a maximum occupancy of 25 people, but I have an 1,800 square foot space. So it just means that you're going to be very comfortable and it's never going to be crowded in my space. But if I were a walk-in establishment, that would be almost impossible to control and, to limit that sort of volume of guests.
Gotcha. Okay. So this is all your brick and mortar now.
Yeah.
Which you said you'd started back in March of 23. The planning of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Started that whole process, inspections, getting that ball rolling, and then opened essentially the first week of December. That was when I opened. That was when I finally, I think it was like the last week of November, I left my ATC final inspection to be able to open and went and did my last mobile class. Yes, it was fantastic. It felt like, the image of someone kicking a can further, and that's how I felt at that point. It was like one of those things like, I'm never opening. It just keeps getting pushed back. And so when it finally happened, I was on cloud 9.
I bet. I mean, that's now your baby can breathe. Now
Yes.
You can really do what you want to do.
Yes.
But how did you get to that point where you're like, I need a brick and mortar? And then also, how did you land on where you landed?
Well, like I said, when I first had the idea, because I really was disappointed that I couldn't provide the alcohol. And I realized that might sound odd, but part of it is because so much of what goes into being able to create a beautiful cocktail is being able to explore different, beautiful spirits. And it just, from my perspective, made sense. Like, I don't want to tell people, like, you have to go buy this thing and you might only use it for this one cocktail, and I love the idea of being able to host tastings, like rum tastings, or just to be able to discover the spirits more, right? You can't do that when you're mobile. I mean, I can't tell people, hey, let's have a rum tasting, go buy these 12 different rums. I mean, that's
a lot.
That would be a lot, right? That's impractical. But I wanted to be able to do those types of things. And I never wanted it to be limited to just, even though I'm technically a private event space, I wanted to be able to offer things the same way that I do in my own public classes. So the way my private and public are different, the setup is exactly the same. 3 cocktails, 2.5 hours, an obscene amount of learning. But there's a food element. Citigroup, hospitality provide, that's built into the pricing. Obviously, when I was mobile, I would tell, I was like, you need to provide food.
Right.
More than a vegetable tray, because when you're drinking, you need food. I mean, like, come on, y'all, think about what
it's an event. You're not just coming to shake a mixer for 5 minutes, pour a glass, and then go home. It's an event.
Yes.
And I love that.
And have a bite to eat. And host, they would provide the food, but now I need to provide the food, right? But remember, I don't have a kitchen. So I'm like,
there's no kitchen.
There's no kitchen. I do not provide any of the food at all. But Citigroup Hospitality they were one of the first ones that I reached out to, and they were great. I knew them from Catholic because they do, right? So I had a relationship sort of to start off with, and that made that very easy. And it was the type of food that I knew I would want people to be able to have while they're consuming cocktails, right? And so there's a food element. I give everyone an Uber voucher. I
saw that on your website, and I love that.
It was very important to me that Baton Rouge not be a less safe space because the Tipsy Librarian existed.
100%. And now you're able to say that you are not contributing to that, right? You're making sure that your guests get to and from your establishment safely.
I'm literally going to take some of what you pay, give it right back to you in the form of an Uber voucher. And people are like, oh, does Uber? No, Uber doesn't comp any of that. That is just purely my own conscience, because that is very important to me. I want people, I always say, let's make a POUR decision, not a POOR decision, right? And they're called accidents for a reason, because no one ever plans on it. No one ever starts out thinking something unfortunate is going to happen. And that was important. Like, what can I do at the end of the day to make sure that, encourage good decision making from my guest. So there are those elements. But the difference between my public and private is that I set the menu for my public classes, right? Private, you get to pick the 3. But the public classes have turned out to be, so I couldn't do public classes when I was mobile, right?
Right.
Because I couldn't provide the alcohol. I couldn't be like, hey, I couldn't go to someone and be like, hey, you should totally host me.
You should host a party that I'll come and
pick
teach.
all the cocktails, right? And they're like, but I don't know if I like those cocktails, right? But I'm like, trust me, these are amazing. But what's fun is, so for example, we have this Friday, I have a classic rum cocktails. We're going to do a mojito, a banana daiquiri, and a Mai Tai, right? And I do different themed ones. But I always place my menus on there with the same exact information that if I were sending it to someone who was booking a private class. So that way you can make an informed decision. Are these cocktails I would want to learn how to make? But what's fun about it is maybe if you were hosting a private event, you and 10 of your friends wouldn't really want to do 3 rum cocktails. But there are people in the city who they would absolutely love to learn those, right? And so in that sense, the public classes have turned out to be this wonderful community where people who want to learn to make those things all come together. I did an old-fashioned one this past Saturday. It just never...
You did 3 different old-fashions?
Yeah. We did, so the first one I did an amaretto old-fashioned with maple syrup. We did a rum old-fashioned over a coconut water cube for our second one. And then our last one, we did a campfire one where I did a graham cracker-infused bourbon made a toasted marshmallow syrup, a few other things in there. It sounds like it would be sweet, but it wasn't. It was all the flavors of a s'more, including the smokiness, minus the sweetness.
Yeah.
And I was really nervous, I'm going to tell you, because we all have palate preferences. I always say that there's a difference between a bad cocktail and one that isn't your palate preference. A bad cocktail is a cocktail that's unbalanced in any way. But one that isn't your palate preference, it can be beautifully balanced, but it's just maybe the flavors aren't your personal preference, right? But you can still learn to appreciate that cocktail. And I do, because I have to sometimes teach and, cocktails and perfect cocktails that aren't my personal preference, like 3 old fashions, right? But having said that, it was a lot of fun. Well, first of all, that forces me to really grow and, like I said, expand my own palate. But it was a great time. And, there were little pockets. I had a group of 18 and, but it was mostly 2, maybe 4 people here. But by the end of the evening, like everyone is just like they were old friends. And it wasn't because they were tipsy, not by any means. Because like I said, it's about a 3-hour period. It really isn't as much as I think what some people might think. But there's just this wonderful camaraderie of people who've come together for a common purpose because they enjoy a particular thing.
Yeah.
All just having a great time, sharing food together, sharing drinks together, visiting, listening. I have a vinyl record player in there. And there's just something about vinyl that creates a different vibe altogether. And it's just good vibes in there. And I'm really grateful for that. So whereas private events are often centered around, it might be a birthday or some other celebration. And those are all wonderful things. And I'm so grateful I get to share in those. The public classes tend to be people are there because they want to learn to make those 3 cocktails.
Right.
And I usually enjoy that because, like I said, those are 3 cocktails that I wanted to teach people to make that maybe a private group wouldn't have been as, might have been too narrow or something for a private group.
Yeah, they wouldn't have thought to make 3 different types of old fashions.
Right. Like you're going to have a hard time getting in your group of friends. And that just tends to be it because there inevitably, some of you would want to, and then others would be like, oh, but I really want, I prefer these other types of cocktails. So you end up having to meet in the middle whenever you're doing your group classes, your private group classes.
So, and are you coming up with these recipes for these different drinks? Like, did you have to actually come up with 3 different old-fashioned recipes, or are you pulling the information from somewhere else and then creating the rest of it?
Both.
Okay.
It depends. I do both. There are some cocktails that I teach that are absolutely my original recipes. And then there are others that come from others. Now I'm a librarian, so what they get in my class, they actually get, it looks like an old, like the old school book pocket in the back of, when you check out a book.
Yeah,
the old due date slips. That's what the recipes are written on, right?
Oh.
Yeah, it's very, very on brand, right?
I love it.
It's so old school. And that really did just stem from when I was first starting out. I had no idea what to put them on. And I thought, well, surely I'll come up with something later on because this is, I don't know, there has to be something more sophisticated than this. And it turns out they're a huge hit. And so here I am, however long later, and they're still a hit.
Imagine taxiing on a plane looking toward the end of the runway. It seems so far away, it's even hard to see it. And that's what the concept of retirement probably felt like when you were in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, way far in the distance, not visible or even a concern. But as you turn 50, something happens. Retirement suddenly seems like something real, something not too far away. In your 50s, you are rolling down the runway. Retirement is getting closer and closer, faster and faster, weeks and months zipping by. But are you even ready for a successful takeoff to retirement? Fear not, there's still runway left. But the time is now. Time to make progress and time to get a plan. The Runway Decade will help you get organized, get energized, and give you the direction you need to take off to your desired retirement. The Runway Decade, building a pre-retirement flight plan in your 50s.
But I always give credit to the recipe. Whoever created that recipe, it's going to have under the author section that, whoever's responsible for it. But yeah, I get to teach some that are my original ones too. And so that's a lot of fun. But there's a lot of value in learning the classics. And I love being able to, when there's a history to a cocktail, that's so much fun to be able to teach. And there are just some cocktails that are great templates, sort of core type cocktails that when you learn those, you can then learn so many, you're sort of limitless in the number of cocktails that you can recreate as riffs of that. So I think there's tremendous value in learning the historic cocktails. There are lots of beautiful ones out there and people aren't familiar with them. And the advantage to learning an historic one is, whereas if it's one of my original recipes, yes, they're going to leave with that. They can recreate that anytime. But if they learn something like a sidecar or a clover club, that's a cocktail they should be able to go anywhere and order. And they'll know right away whether or not this place does cocktails beautifully or not, because they'll have had one made the way it was supposed to be. And they'll have an appreciation for it. But yeah, so you should be able to go anywhere in the same way you can order an old fashioned, right? Any of those, classic cocktails you can get anywhere. So finding some that you love and really do enjoy, there's a lot of value in that because it's a great sort of standby you can go to.
Yeah, and any one of those traditional cocktails are gonna be different depending on where you get it. And I've come to notice it's like I can order old fashioned at 3 different restaurants. I'm gonna have 3 different old fashions, and it's like, what's the real old fashioned?
Well, we learned that, and so what is the template to an old fashioned? Right at the end of the day, it's 2 ounces. It's a spirit forward cocktail, right? Historically, it was going to be 2 ounces of your whiskey, couple of dashes of bitter, and a little bit of sweet. So it is a very spirit forward drink, right? Now today we can make an old fashioned from rum. I might use a combination of cognac and rum to get my 2 ounces, right? I can make a Oaxacan old fashioned where I can use tequila and mezcal, right? It's the same idea. It's all a riff, but it's essentially that same template of 2 ounces of your spirit, a couple of dashes of bitters, a little bit of sweet. And where you can really play with that is the combination of flavors. That's where your bitters and your type of sweet that you use, right? But it's always about understanding your ingredients. And that's what I've learned where we struggle, because that's the key to a beautiful cocktail. You have to understand your ingredients. And, you have to understand the ratios and the templates of kind of how they work together. And I find most of us don't. But once you do learn them, it makes it very easy to distinguish. I'm sure you've had many old fashions that were not amazing.
Yes.
Yes. But when you get one that is amazing, right.
You know it right off from the first sip. You're like, that is a good old fashioned.
And there's a better than average chance that person knew what they were doing when they made it. But it's also a possibility that maybe that recipe has just, that's just that particular place's recipe. They know that formula works and this is what they do. But it's, like I said, there's a lot of value in learning the classics, because like I said, even when you make an old fashioned, but like I said, there's so many more and so many gorgeous pre-prohibition, prohibition era cocktails, and they're beautiful in their own right. But when you go somewhere and you have one and it is made beautifully, or it's not, like I said, that right there can just let you know what sort of, it tells you a lot about that bar program right there. I have lots of rules about why, when, and where, like little clues, not rules, but cues for, is this a place where I would want to order a cocktail? Is this palate experience going to be what I'm looking for? There are lots of, and I share those during my class, not just so that people can be better informed in ordering. That's all.
So one would think when you have a business that's in the spirit game, you would find yourself drinking more out of habit. But it sounds like for you, you're chasing flavors, and you're very particular about what you're going to order and where it is, and will they make it correctly. So do you find that you're looking at a menu more intently now since opening?
Well, not even just since opening, but yes, that is how I approach. And so I always say I would rather no cocktail than a bad cocktail. But yes, I am always looking for a palate experience in the same way that I enjoy a beautiful food or a beautiful meal. I want my palate to be excited in some way. I want something different. I want something that's just lovely, right? And so yes, I tend to look at the types of spirits that are on the back bar. For me, that's often a clue as to whether or not I'm probably going to want anything that being on this side of it now, having a bar, I have a lot more familiarity with different spirits and things, right? And that is the fun part, because inevitably Martins can't carry everything, right? And
right.
So in the sense, but we all get our spirits, Martins, Total Wine, BenQ, any restaurant, everywhere around here, we all get our spirits from the same, we're all pulling from the same places, right? So it's enabled me to explore, or even ones that I used to buy for myself that I would purchase through special order or something. Now I know where I can get this, like, okay, I know this comes from this vendor here or that, but I'm able to use those now in my drinks. I'm not just limited to what Martins has available, right? So I've been able to expand on that. And that was something that was important to me, because there are just so many beautiful flavors being produced out there. And I love getting to share that with people, because I get people all the time. They're like, oh, I don't like cocktails. I just drink wine. And then they attend my class and they're like, this is the best cocktail I've ever had. And I could just say, and you made it. Like, I didn't even make it for you. You made it yourself. But it's just, we hear that term safe space, but it's a safe space to be able to explore new flavors, different techniques. Like, I get people all the time who, the face they make when they find out we're about to make an egg white cocktail. But I've never had a single person not fall in love after they made one.
Oh, egg white cocktails are delicious.
They are.
They're phenomenal.
They are.
If made properly.
Yes. And they serve a purpose. Like, there's a reason why they're so amazing. It's part of what it is it makes your cocktail so much more velvety and smooth on your palate. But it's because of the way it emulsifies the ingredient. It kind of provides a coating on your palate, so the flavors aren't as sharp and aggressive on your palate. So it's just, it's a little bit silkier the way that it goes down. There's a scientific reason for it. But so yes, it is better, and it's like I said, it makes for a much lovelier cocktail. I don't understand why. I made an Italian sidecar with a class a few weeks back, which is a riff of a traditional sidecar, but I incorporated an egg white into this one. It was a blood orange Amaro, beautiful blood orange Amaro, a really nice cognac, lemon juice, simple egg white, right? But it hit me, and I was like, why are we not just doing an egg white and all sidecars? Because it's just so velvety and so just gorgeous.
So what can people kind of expect from a private class?
So once they reach out and we agree on a date, I always tell everyone, go to my website, and where I have my book now, that's where my calendar is, and it is up to date. Look and see if there's a date that you're interested in that might be available. You have to book it directly through me. Sometimes, for example, if I have 4 classes already scheduled that week, even though that date looks like it's available, it is unlikely that I'm going to say yes to a 5th class that week, just because logistically that's really hard.
So you cap at 4?
I try to, yes. 3 to 4 is ideal. It's a lot to do more than 4. So, but once they confirm that the date is in fact available, they'll put down a deposit so that way no one else can take the date. But then we'll start the process of planning their event. And then, once they show up, it is, the 3 cocktails over 2.5 hours, and they get to grab a bite to eat. For my private groups, I give them, a small glass of sparkling, just to set a nice tone for the evening. And, but then we get started, and we make the cocktail. They get to break, enjoy their cocktail. I always say, I hope they enjoy it. Grab a bite to eat. We reset their station, right? So I always say it's never going to be as beautiful as it is when they walk in, because people are often impressed by the setup. But we clean up their mess, reset it for the next cocktail. They get a fresh shaker, the whole 9 yards, and everything's been. And then we repeat that process for the 3 cocktails. And it's, like I said, they get to visit, and it's fun because you can watch as the evening progresses. Everyone starts out very quiet, very serious. And then, of course, as the evening progresses, it gets louder. People get a little bit looser or whatever, and they're just a little more relaxed. Yeah. So it's like I said, it's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun.
So do you have team members that are helping you do this, or is it just you?
I have my husband who owns his own business, and then who might be the hardest working man and anyone who comes to my classes will quickly attest to that. But he comes in and helps me run my classes. And I have my niece actually whom I've hired, but she's part-time. So it's a very small crew that I have. And I know I do need to add more people. That's part of the challenge, I think, in growing a business. You always want to make sure that you're getting someone you don't want to grow too quickly. And you're always waiting to see, like, okay, do I need to bring on more? What do I need here? I I'm considering adding another part-time person as well. I'm mostly sad because my niece is graduating from college this semester, and she will probably be leaving me. And
She says, I'm hanging up my bartender cap.
yes,
And I'm calling it a session.
I know. But no, she's amazing, and so having. I am I'm very detail oriented. I am particular. I want things the way that I know they should be or think they should be. And so trying to figure out how to bring someone in and still maintain that and also communicate that in a way that is effective is, I'm sure like with most people, that's something that I'm learning, that managing people is something a little bit different for me beyond teenagers who are students, that's a little bit different. So like I said, there's a learning curve. I had someone ask recently what the end game is.
It's a good question.
I know. I wish, and I think I probably looked at them like a deer in headlights. And I said, I think I'm so glad that I'm finally in now. But truth be told, because this person was like, the story behind it, being a librarian, like all of this, is, I love this. This could be huge. You could do this, you could do that. But I was very quick to say, I don't want to grow so quickly that I compromise the quality of what it is that I deliver. At the end of the day, I am still very patron focused, right? It is very important to me, just as it was with that group of old fashioned fans. And look, I'm not kidding. Like, I cannot stress that enough, because people who love old fashions love their old fashioned. But everyone likes their own version of it. And I knew I was going to have 18 people in there.
18 different versions of an old fashioned.
And to be able to do right by all of them, that was so important to me. That's why people don't realize how many times a recipe gets tested and tested and tested before I even put it out there. But I'll never sacrifice the quality of what I do, because it's so important that each person that comes in, I want them to have that experience. I want them to feel that they learned a lot, that they had a good value for the money that they spent, that they came to me sort of wanting to learn, and I didn't violate that trust. So I don't know going forward, and I had I had a class the other evening, and a gentleman said, he was like, this could be huge. You could franchise this. And another one quickly chimed in, and he said, no, she can't. He said, because she is what is driving this, and she can't be everywhere. And so in that sense, I don't know what the future looks like, because I've not really thought about what it would mean to train someone or to get someone else to care the way that I care.
Right.
I can't even, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you, I'm talking down to a single bar spoon of trying to perfect a recipe. And then once I think I've nailed it, there are going to be at least half a dozen more times that I recreate it, just to ensure that consistently it can be recreated. I'll never throw a recipe at a group blindly, like, oh, I hope this goes right, because that's not fair to them.
Right.
They're coming expecting a particular experience, and I'm going to give them that. So I don't know I haven't figured out that part of how to
scale it.
Yeah. How do you, move this to wherever? I still get a lot of requests for mobile. That's not
happening anymore.
Still too much. I'm going to need a little time of being situated before I'm willing to reconsider that again.
Thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Lake Men's Health Center with Our Lady of the Lake Physicians Group. Guys, I know it's tough to get out and go to the doctor. I know it's challenging to find time in our busy days, but I promise you, signing up to be a part of this group with Dr. Curtis Chastain and Dr. Tyler Boudreau. You won't regret it for several reasons, but most of those being the fact of the time it saves, where you're able to get in on the same day, get that appointment done, and spend that time you need to talk with them about what your health goals and concerns are, as well as ensuring that the financial investments you have, you will be able to live out and see those come to fruition. So if you're an investing guy, you know all about and planning for the future and investing in the future. There's no other more important thing to invest in than your health. Make sure you go check them out. Our Lady of the Lake Physicians Group Men's Health Center, and tell them Patty G sent you.
But yeah, like I said, I don't know what the right. Like I said, I see a lot of opportunity and potential, but I want to make sure that nothing of what I think makes this wonderful is lost in that process.
Yeah. I think you're on the right path. I think you're going about it the right way.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Like I said, I feel every day I'm inventing a wheel. So it's like, I don't know, and it's hard when you don't have someone else in the industry. Like, I talk to people in the spirits industry, but this is just so different from what other bartenders or things do. And bartenders can be pretty protective of that's their intellect. That's their property. That's how they make money, right?
Right.
I give. This is what librarians do. We give our stuff. Granted, they're paying for it. They're attending the class, but they're, I want to give you. I don't hide anything. If I made that syrup, I'm telling you exactly. I'm giving you the recipe so that you can absolutely recreate that yourself. I don't leave anything out because I want you to be able to recreate it, and successfully on your own.
Yeah. Well, and that is part of your brand. People being able to take what they've made in your class, take it home, take it to a party, make it exactly how it's supposed to be made. And then people start being inquisitive. How did you make that cocktail? Where is it from? Where's the recipe from? Who showed you how to do all that? And then it's, the Tipsy Librarian.
Like I said, it's a lot of fun. And hands down, the best part of this entire gig, because it is sort of surreal. When I sit here and think about that, kind of a little aside, I was the librarian at Catholic for 13 years. I was the honor board moderator for 10 years. And now Miss Howell owns a bar. And I've had former students in my classes now, of course they're married, they have kids now. And I had one of them ask one time, he's like, Miss Howell, is this weird for you? And I said, probably not as weird as it is for you. But it is strange to think that this is where life has brought me. Like I said, I literally, when I left Catholic High, I did not know it was to start this, even though I always had the dream of this type of space. I knew I was an empty nester whose kid was completely off of her payroll because he had graduated from college and had an amazing job offer. I knew he was getting engaged. I knew, and he lives in, Charleston, and I knew I didn't want to miss any of that. And even though you have a ton of time off for holidays and summers when you're an educator, it's not flexible time.
Right.
It's not like, okay, well, I'm going to be gone Friday and I'll be back on Tuesday because I'm going to go fly to Charleston, for whatever.
Yeah.
And, I joke, I'm like, so I left, he got off my payroll. And so what did I do? I quit my job. Those did not cancel each other out. But I think like a lot of people after the pandemic, I wasn't sure anymore. It was the first time in my life because we only have one. And he attended college out of state, and but we were always a very close family. And I think like a lot of parents, my focus was always on what is best for my family. And I absolutely did enjoy what I did for a very long time. But, it was just the first time, my husband owned his own business. Our son was successfully doing his thing in another state. And I had, even though, I don't know, I just felt this urgency of, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I felt like if I didn't leave in that moment, I would never do it. And that sounds like a really strange thing to say because we have annual conferences every year. And I'll never forget, I had, Lisa Harvey was principal at the time, and we were talking, and I was like, I don't know. I don't even know if I'm doing a great job at this anymore. And she was wonderfully affirming, and, was like, that's absurd. And, I told her I would just take some more time to think about it. And so when it was time to have that conversation again, she was like, hey, are you ready to let me know your decision? I honestly still didn't know, because I thought, you don't know what you want to do. So why would you leave something that you can do well? I mean, like, it's all the practical things, it's good pay, you have good benefits, you love your cup, like, why would you leave this? Even if it's not filling your cup in the same way, it's not hard, right? Why would you make
Right.
this change at this point in your life? There are a lot of perks to this. And I'll never forget. And so when it was literally the morning of, I didn't know what I was going to say, but I remember exactly where I was in the library that morning before I walked over. And all of a sudden, it just overwhelmed me, this thought of, I felt like I had to jump out the plane. And in my head, I was going, but hey, moron, you don't have a parachute. It's like, I don't know, but I feel like if I don't jump out right now, I'm never getting out of the plane. And I feel like I need to get out the plane right now. And I did. And my husband, I took a few months, because we had wedding preparations we were a part of and all. But my husband was the one who was like, you have this idea. Come on, this is what you can do. You can be mobile, and this is what you need to do. You need to apply for this. Apply for your resale. Okay. Now you need to call the ATC. Well, it turns out, like I said, ATC was like, nothing. But it was, just really overwhelming to take a leap of faith. To have people embrace this is humbling beyond comprehension. I mean, at the end of the day, I still see myself as a librarian. It is surreal that I'm on this entrepreneurial program and I'm a librarian. I'm like, at the end of the day, I'm a librarian. But I knew there was something in me that said, if I don't do this, someone else is going to come along and take this idea. And this is my idea, dang it. And I don't want anybody else taking it. And so I did. And yeah, so here we are.
I love that.
Jumped out of a plane, and I'm I am the most risk adverse person you could ever, stereotypes, I say sometimes exist. There are a lot of very stereotypical librarian traits that I have, and I am rather risk adverse, although one would not know it from the last couple of years.
Yeah. And when they walk into your storefront, it's like, there's no way that she's not this. Like, this is not her.
Oh, that one of my, an old friend, when my very first open, and she stopped by, and we hadn't, that's the great thing about old friends. You may not be in contact for a while. She stopped by, and she just looked around, and she said, this is you. This is totally and completely you. And that meant a lot, because, when I was originally, when I was working with a designer who was offering some suggestions originally, I ended up changing almost everything. They went out of town, and I just kind of went bananas. And when they came back, I was like, so just to let you know, I kind of changed everything. And what I said was, it might not be as cohesive of a look, but at this point in my life, I don't need it to be perfect, because I'm not perfect. That's the beauty. That is the one nice thing about getting older. You get more comfortable in your skin, right? You stop trying to live your life to please everyone else, and you start realizing, okay, but what do I, like, who am I? What's important to me? And I said, but I need it to be me. And that, more than anything, when someone walks in there, I need them to see, for better or worse, this is who you're getting. And I am humbled by how well received it has been, because I get to work. I never have, I don't want to jinx that. Okay, I don't want to put that out there. But I always have, I have the most amazing interactions. Like, people, I get the happiest, most wonderful experiences with people. People are delightful. They are a joy. And I get to be a part of that. My husband sells outdoor power equipment. And so he's like, no one's ever very happy when they come in my store because their stuff's either broken or they're having to spend a lot of money to buy something new that they, it's not fun buying a new lawnmower or whatever.
Right.
But people are happy when they're having a cocktail, right? Or at least they should be. And I'm so grateful for that. Like, I get the loveliest people who have invited me into their home when I was mobile or have come into my space. And I am utterly humbled. Each year at Christmas, my husband prints a book of all my Instagram posts for the year. And I have them on the tables in my store and people always want to buy them. And I'm like, oh, no, they're not for sale. But it's been a hectic few months, but I will tell you, I was flipping through, he did one at Christmas and I was sort of sad because I didn't even get to post a lot last year. I was so busy, yada, yada, yada. And there's not even going to be a book this year. And, just having one of my personal, dramatic moments. And nonetheless, he did. And I was flipping through. And last year when I was mobile, someone's son had created a little sign on a chalkboard that said I want to make it clear the son was not present for the party, but that said, "Welcome, Tipsy Librarian." And when I flipped to that page in the book, it brought tears to my eyes because more than anything, that's what has happened over this last year or whatever. I've had so many wonderful people who've either, like I said, welcomed me into their home or welcomed me, allowed my space to be a part of their 50th birthday or whatever other milestone there's out, that they would think to include me in something that is special to them is immensely humbling. And so that is one of the many reasons why I will never sacrifice the quality of experience, because that's special to get to be a part of something like that with people. And, I don't take that for granted at all.
Yeah, no, I love all that.
Well, thanks.
This is sincere. It's sincere. It's authentic. It's who you are, and I think that's what is pushing the company and the brand forward. Is the fact that you're not trying to make it something who you aren't. You're just yourself, and you said, "This is what we're going to do. This is how it is," and everybody's just gravitating towards it.
Well, I hope so. And one of the things I really would like to be able to do is have at some point bring in some guest teachers, because I don't pretend at any point in time to ever be the end-all be-all authority. I'm always learning. The only thing that I know that I want to be super cautious about is that when I do bring in someone, I just have to be able to still ensure that my guests are getting the same quality of learning experience that they would typically expect from me. And sometimes, and that's where that educator background of mine comes into that I know, I can teach well. I can, because I had to teach myself. I had to take things that were not part of my world or, intuitive in any way and make them make sense. So I know how to make them make sense to someone else. And sometimes when you're amazing at doing a thing, you've not had to be as intentional in articulating the why of what you do. And the why is what removes the randomness. And that's where the learning can really take place. And so, but Toby Maloney has promised me that at some point he is going to come teach a class for me, and I can't wait for that.
Fantastic.
Yes. But there are still some other people that I would love to have come in, and assuming they would want to. But again, whether it's something we do in tandem, because like I said, I tend to teach more of the basics structurally. I introduce sort of all the concepts in the beginning, and then with each recipe, I tie it back to those. Like, how is the spirit working in our recipe? This is why we're using that much of it. This is how the sweet element is working. This is how all of those things get tied back with each recipe that we go to. So it's like, oh, okay, I get that. That makes sense.
Yeah, you make it make sense.
Yes. But having said that, there's so many people who just have a beautiful artistry of flavors, just thinking like Alan is one of them. The flavors he thinks in are just extraordinary. I love to go have one of Alan's drinks. It's always going to be a treat for my palate.
Yeah, he likes to do the same things kind of as you. Like, how can we play with this to make it pop with different flavors?
Yes. And I'll tell you who else. You know who else is amazing? And it's just because, and I'm sure there are others, because I just don't get out very much over the last year and a half.
You've been working.
I know. I spend all my weekends working.
You've been
now.
the bar.
Yes. And so, but I don't belong to City Club, but I have a family member who will, on occasion, invite me. And if he's listening to this, he should feel free to invite me. I don't know when I have time off again, but
you would like an invitation.
I would.
That's all you're saying.
Yes,
just an invitation.
Ken Milo at City Club, he makes a beautiful cocktail, and he pays attention to all the details, and yeah. So he's another one. That I think just, I tell people, like, those are the two that I tend to, go to and enjoy the most. And of course, Ken, just his technique, and, just there's a little bit of a showmanship there, but he does all the little tiny things and makes beautiful classic recipes. But, what I enjoy so much about going to Alan's, I know it will always be balanced, but I will taste something that I've never had before, and that is delightful. It's delightful.
Magical that a cocktail can do that.
I know. I hate to say it's like food, because that sounds not right, but it is. It's like a beautiful meal that you put together, and it's, what is it, an amuse-bouche, just something to amuse the mouth.
Yeah, I love that.
It's so, yeah. Like I said, Alan just thinks in most extraordinary flavors, just things that I would never think of. But I feel like one thing that he and I do share is that we do both enjoy unique, beautiful spirits that are beautifully made, and how to highlight those in an extraordinary fashion. Yeah. He's much better at it. Much better at it. Huh?
I don't know. I think you're doing a fantastic job yourself.
Well, thank you. I like I said, but that's where I go whenever I want a cocktail. I always say the best cocktail is the amazing cocktail someone else makes for you, but the second best cocktail is the amazing one you make for yourself. And in the absence of the former, you should be able to do the latter. So,
I love that. I think we're just going to call it a wrap at that. I mean, that's the best way to close out the show.
It is. I thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
Like I said, I realize I'm a little bit different, but you're right. There's nothing quite like this, and in Louisiana. But I'm honored. I really am. Thank you.
You're making the wheel as you go, and we're here for it.
Well, thanks.
Thank you for bringing this to our city and our state. We needed it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I do. So I'm really grateful. It really is a privilege to be able. I mean, think about it. The thing that I love and enjoyed as a hobby, just kind of an area of personal curiosity and passion, I now get to do for a profession. I mean, that's
not many people can say that.
I know.
And I think that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. It lends itself to being that open and diverse for what you can do and what you can build a business out of. That's like, if you have this passion or you have this hunger to do something and you can make it into a business, like, just go for it. Get out the plane.
Yeah, jump out the plane. Just trust, it really is. And I feel like I'm an example of, you're never too old to dream a new dream.
Yeah.
It would have been absolutely easy to stay put. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong, but you have something in you, I always tell people, same thing with a cocktail. There's only one way to find out. You got to give it a try.
Yeah.
I'm grateful it's worked out. I've had a nice landing. For someone who didn't have a parachute, it's been a beautiful landing. So yes, I don't casually recommend just quitting your job, and but sometimes it just feels like as the universe is pulling you somewhere else, and I really do. I think it was to do this.
Yeah, sometimes it just makes sense to jump out and leave it all
jump
behind.
out the plane, and you're like, all right, here it is. The door is open. Come on. Well, thanks. Thank you, Patty, for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. And for those listening or watching, if you're interested in what the Tipsy Librarian has to offer, we're going to link her website and her Instagram and all of our socials to these show notes. So make sure to check it out there and let her know that you heard about him on the Patty G Show and that you're interested in a class or 3 different old fashions. I mean, why not? Y'all go check it out.
Can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
You're like,
Go
why
for
not?
it.
You've said 8 million. So a lot of times, you're putting my Instagram out there.
Yes.
I will just tell you that. So people ask all the time, what is that Instagram handle?
Yes.
It is the call number if you were to go to the library and check out a cocktail recipe book. When I started it years ago, I used to post all my recipes. I've stopped since, unless it's someone else's recipe, but just same reason, intellectual property. And people are now paying to get those. But it was truly meant just to be a resource. And if you go back to some of my earlier posts, you'll see it very much reads in the way that I set up why this cocktail works or whatever it is. But nonetheless, that is the call number. So if you're ever in the library and you want to check out a cocktail recipe book, just go to that 641.874 section of the library and you're going to find all kinds of cocktail recipe books.
Wow.
That's
Even
geeky
the
on
Instagram handle is that much level of attention.
or just that level of geeky, right?
I love it,
It's,
though.
You can't out nerd a librarian, right?
Well, thank you. That was a treat. That was a little accoutrement right there.
A little land up there. There you go. That's a whole other level, right? Yes. You can't even think that up to be on brand. That's how authentic that geekiness is. So, but yes.
Like, even that makes sense to me. Like, you saying that that's the Instagram handle and the meaning behind it, that just makes sense to me
Yes.
because of who you are and what your background is.
The only ones who ever understand it are librarians or people who've worked in a library. They are the only people on earth who ever know, because most people are genuinely confused by it. And I get it. I didn't know the Dewey Decimal System until I went and got my master's in library science. But that's what that is. And so, yeah, go to the library, check out some cocktail books.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
This was a treat. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Come take a class.
I am. Yes.
You and your spouse.
Chit chat.
Come take a class. I would be honored.
Well, we're going to definitely chit chat after this show. So thank y'all so much. We're going to catch y'all on the next one.